Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I'm going to meet with a guest speaker who's going to be talking about all the spirits at Brenau University. So stay tuned and be ready. So this is our guest speaker. You may say your name.
Hi, my name is Sahara Outler. I am the Director of Campus Communities here at Brenau, and I am going to be talking about some of our ghosts here at Brenau and some of the ghost stories that some of our students, faculty, staff, and alumni have experienced. So, to start, Brenau was founded in 1878 in Gainesville, Georgia, as the Georgia Baptist Female Seminary, and we are 145 years old. So, in those 145 years, many spirits and ghosts have come and gone, but there are still a few that linger amongst us that have a legacy of their own. So, starting in Yona Lobby, Yona is where our dining hall and one of our dormitories is located. Yona Hall is located on the second floor and houses upperclassmen and freshman students, while Hopkins Dining Hall is on the first floor. Yona was one of the first buildings at Brenau, so it is 145 years old. So, of course, there have been some spooky things that have happened there. So, one student recalls that while living in Yona Hall, whenever she would sleep, her light switches would always turn back on. Another student remembers getting ready for a Halloween party with friends. She opened a pack of Skittles and she sat them on her bed. And when she walked away to grab something, she turned around and all the Skittles were scattered across her bed and her floor, which is spooky.
Yeah.
And there were no fans or windows that were open during the time. There were no fans that were on, and no one else was in the room with her.
Mm-hmm.
So in Wilkes Hall, which is in Yona, still on the second floor, but it's just a different hall attachment, a student had an Easter basket with Cadbury eggs in it, and when she woke up the next morning, they were all half eaten. And she never had a roommate. Also in Wilkes, a student had a collection of pennies in one of those water cooler jugs, like the big blue plastic ones. Mm-hmm. And she came back from her class and all the pennies were face up on the floor. And she thought her roommate was pranking her, and so she put them all back in the jug, and then she went to use the restroom down the hall because they had a community bathroom. And when she came back, the pennies were back on the floor and all face up again. So that is some interesting stories from Wilkes. And then in the Bailey Pierce complex, so currently Yona Hall is attached to Bailey Hall and Pierce Hall, mm-hmm. But when the university was first built, they were all separate. So they've now been connected over time. So adjacent to Yona is the Bailey Pierce complex, and it's connected to the dining hall. That's where the executive offices are, and also where Pierce Auditorium is. Pierce Auditorium is our oldest and our largest theater on campus, and it is indeed home to our famous Brenau ghost, Agnes. So, Agnes, the story of kind of her life, it starts as her being a student here, and she was a music student, and she had fallen in love with her music teacher, and she had this idea that they were in love. He had told her that they were gonna get married and like have a life together, and she was head over heels for this guy, and they go home for a winter break, and she comes back in January and she sees that he is married and he has a new wife, and of course that makes her very distraught. And so the legend of Agnes is that she went into Pierce Auditorium and that she hung herself in the theater. Now, there are a couple altering perspectives. Some say that she hung herself above the stage in Pierce, but some people say that she hung herself above one of the swimming pools. It is still being debated today, so we are not 100% sure what happened, but that's kind of the university ghost. That's kind of the ghost that everybody is familiar with, and she plays a lot of tricks in Pierce. So some of those, let me see if I can find it. So a musical theater student recalls visiting Pierce after dark to play the grand piano and sing. She was rehearsing for a show that she was going to be in, and in the middle of playing a song, all the lights in Pierce shut off. And so she got up and she turned the lights back on, and she walked back, and as soon as she walked back, the lights turned off again. And so she turned back and turned the lights back on, took a step away from the switch, and it shut off again. And she was just like, I'm done with this. And she was like, maybe I don't need to practice anymore. And so she ended up leaving. Another theater student was in Pierce doing rehearsals with another student, and they felt a hand run all the way down their spine. And she looked over to see if it was her fellow classmate, and they were on the other side of the room. A different student recalls when the university was hosting a dance group on campus, the group was like, they said that they didn't believe in ghosts, and they were warned, and they were like, sometimes the tech gets a little weird, and they were like, oh, we don't believe in ghosts, whatever. And the minute the director informed the stage manager of this, all of the ropes in the fly rail in Pierce started swinging back and forth in unison as soon as they said that they didn't believe in ghosts. It took about 3 to 4 people to move the ropes in this way. So it was definitely very creepy at the time. And during the same company's use of the theater, they were running sound for the event, and the person working the light board was from the company. He said into the headset right before the show, if Agnes shows up, we'll take care of her. Then he paused and said, that's weird, the sound person just left. When they confirmed that they were still there, he asked, well, then who just opened the door? And they looked over their shoulder, and they could see a shadow on the wall behind them, and no one was there. The shadow came over and settled down next to them, and they said, hi, Agnes. And the shadow raised up again and shot through the wall. The same moment, all the headsets made a loud pop and went out, and nothing worked for the rest of the show. So all the tech failed right then.
Yikes.
I know. So on the very far end of the Bailey Pierce complex is the Simmons Visual Arts Center. And that is located next to Pierce Auditorium. There's like a hallway that leads there. That's where one of our art galleries is located. And they host a variety of art, of student art, faculty, staff art, internationally recognized artists, as well as local artists. A former student working in the art department was put in charge of locking up the second floor of Simmons, which is where the balcony of Pierce is located. And she recalls looking through the door, and when she came back early the next day, the doors were open, but the lock was still locked. An alumna of Brenau also recalls working in the President's Gallery, which is the gallery at the top on the second floor near Pierce. They recall working there, and they said the curtains always moved by themselves, and a specific corner of the room was always colder than the rest of the room. And they said they never felt alone in that space. So that could potentially be Agnes that is lurking over there. Now, when I was a freshman in 2016, there was an event that was held at Brenau called Agnes Palooza. And we had a guest speaker come to Brenau, and we basically went on this tour of in the basement of Pierce to the very top of Pierce. And that's where we actually learned that ghost hunters came to Brenau, the very popular TV show where they go to places all around the world and kind of listen to the ghosts that people have said are there. And so they actually came to Pierce Auditorium, and they not only were able to find Agnes, but they said that there were 3 other spirits in Pierce Auditorium. And one was a couple. It was a younger woman and a man, and they said it sounded like she was weeping, and I think she was saying, like, please don't leave, and the guy was basically comforting her. And so those 2 ghosts are you can usually hear them at the very top of Pierce. There isn't normal access to that point anymore. You have to have like somebody take you up there. But she explained it, the guest speaker explained it as if it was like a loop. So it's the same audio that's basically on a loop. And if you sit up there quietly enough for long enough, you can hear it as well. And then they said that there is I believe, a young boy who is also in Pierce, and I don't know if people have had specific experiences with this young boy, but he's just like very playful, and he's also on the 2nd level at the top of Pierce Auditorium in the balcony. That's where they say you can hear and experience him. And also Agnes, something that she commonly does, she has a special seat in Pierce that is always down. So usually after we have events or shows or convocation or anything in Pierce, staff go through and they let up all the seats instead of leaving them down. And so that's so like housekeeping can clean and, just for safety, just to put all the seats up. And there's one seat that no matter what or how often you put it up, it'll always fall back down.
So it's the same seat?
It's the same seat. I don't know the exact seat number, but I believe it is on the bottom. So on the bottom floor of Pierce is where her seat is. But yeah. So on to the next kind of big ghost at Brenau. His name is Little Red, and he lives in Crudup Hall. Crudup Hall is one of our freshman dorms here at Brenau, and the story of Little Red is it was a little boy during the construction of Crudup Hall. He would play in the building as they were constructing it, like when it was empty. And they hadn't poured the concrete yet in the foundation of the building, and he was playing with a ball, and the story is that he tripped and fell into the embankment where it wasn't filled and he couldn't get out. And the following day, when the construction crew came back and they went to fill in the embankment, and no one knew that there was a boy there, and it says that he passed away in that manner. And so there are a lot of experiences with Little Red. A lot of our freshman students have had experiences. I lived in Crudup my freshman year, and I have experiences from Little Red, but I'll read some of the ones that I have listed for Crudup. He's also known for playing tricks on students living there. So he turns off lights, he unlocks doors, he'll change the channels, he'll change the volume on your TV, he'll move things around in rooms. And the rumor is if you leave red crayon and a sheet of white paper in your closet, like overnight, and you'll wake up and apparently he will draw you a picture.
I never tried to do that. I was kind of scared.
I didn't either. I was like, I don't know what I'm about to summon, but I'll leave it there. So many people have experienced Little Red. So a former student said, Little Red and I had a talk my freshman year. He used to tear things off my wall, multiple pieces of decor, and my mirror. And he would throw things off my desk, like pins and photos that I had. Eventually got to a point that he would knock on my closet door and my dorm room door so loud that I could hear it over my headphones. I read up on child spirits, and Google said to just talk to him because he's a kid and he probably just wants to play. And I told him that he was hearing me and that I would play other ways. Things immediately stopped going wrong, and there were no more knocks on my door. I put a small red ball and a little toy in my closet for him and would talk to him while I was alone in my room. He seemed happier. Also, the landline in my dorm that year couldn't be plugged in because it would ring nonstop, but static would always be on the other side of the line. And so that's one experience from Little Red. Me personally, I lived there in 2016, and my very first day, it was like move-in day, and I was putting clothes in my closet. I was hanging up clothes in my closet, and my light was on. It was like a string that you pull to turn the light on in the closet, and I went and turned towards my bed, and I was picking up more clothes, and I turned back to my closet, and the light was off. And so I looked at my roommate, and I'm like, hey, did you turn off my light? And she was like, I literally haven't moved from my bed. And so I was like, okay, maybe the light bulb went out. Like, I'll just tell the RA to put in a work order and get it replaced. And so I just pulled the string, and the light came back on. So that was a little spooky. And then a different time, I was in my room. Me and my roommate were watching a movie. We were watching Shrek. I love Shrek. And I was trying to turn the volume down on my TV because it was like 2 a.m. and it was a weekend, so we didn't want to like disturb other people in the hall. So as I'm pressing the down button on the volume, and the volume is going back up, like it is doing the exact opposite. And so I said, Little Red, stop. And as soon as I said that, the volume started going back down again. Very weird. Mm-hmm. And my last story of Little Red is me and my entire hall were very close. And so we would always go out to dinner on one of our birthdays. And so I believe it was one of my suite mates, Nicole's birthday. And me and my friend Rachel were the last two people to leave the hall. And everybody else's doors were closed. And so I remember closing my door, and it was automatically locked from the inside. Mm-hmm. And so we were gone maybe 2-3 hours. And when we came back, my door was wide open, the lights were on, but the door was still locked. And nothing in my room was like touched, nothing was moved, nothing was shifted. But the door was just wide open and all the lights were turned on. And so I think that kind of scared a lot of people on my hall when that happened. So yeah, that's some stories about Little Red.
Yeah.
So that kind of concludes the main ghost on campus, but there have definitely been other ghostly experiences on campus. So I'll just read some of those stories and kind of where those building locations are as well. So in the bookstore, which is located on Washington Street, which is right across from where the Pierce Bailey Complex and Yona Hall are located. You can buy all of your course textbooks there, Brenau Spiritware, school supplies, all the school necessities you can get there. But one of the workers at the bookstore. She would often work there by herself, and there's a second floor to that building, and she would hear the front door of the bookstore open because it has like a little bell on it, and she would come downstairs and there would be nobody in the building, which can seem like a little stressful if you think that you're in a building by yourself and you hear a door open and nobody's in there. Let's see, what are some other ones? I have some more residence hall stories. So there's one in West Hall. So West Hall is located on Academy Street, and the Academy building it's not as old as the university, but Brenau used to have a preparatory high school here. So it was like a private high school. Very wealthy families would send their daughters here, and it was like a live-in high school. So that entire academy was residential at one point. It's now split up into 3 sections. So the first section is academy, where there are classrooms, and in the middle portion there is the financial aid office, and then on the very end is West Hall. So still a very old building, but not 145 years old, if that makes sense. So in West Hall, a story from a former student. They said, me and my roommate were on our beds talking about Agnes and how she wasn't real when all of a sudden our mirror fell off of the wall. That would freak me out a lot. In Van Hoos, which is located at the back of Crudup, they're connected through a common space. A former student recalls heading to sleep around 9:30 p.m. one night, and she would sleep with her bed facing the window and with her back to the rest of the room. And one night she felt someone sitting behind her, and they placed their hand on her side. And so she thought it was her roommate who had came back from rehearsal. They were a theater major. And so she sat up and no one was there. And her roommate was asleep in her bed.
Yeah.
And she recalls the presence feeling motherly, but not harmful. Another experience near and close to Van Hoos, we used to have a child development center that is located at the bottom of Van Hoos in the back of where the residence hall is. You can't access it from Van Hoos, but it is on the outside and it has its own separate entrance, but it is a part of the original building's infrastructure. It wasn't added on separately. So a Brenau employee's son attended that daycare, and frequently he would come home and talk about his new friend that he had made, and he mentioned that no one else could see his friend but him, so they just assumed that he just had an imaginary friend, which is very common for children. But a few weeks later, he told his mom that his friend was sad. And she asked him why is your friend sad? And he replied and he said that his friend was dead. And eventually his mom asked what his friend's name was, and her son responded and said his name is Red. So that is kind of solidifies the Little Red stories. And her son, he was 4, so he wouldn't have had any stories told to him about Little Red. It was before she even knew the story of Little Red, so she didn't find out until way later. She didn't tell anybody until way later that Little Red occupied that building space. So definitely very full circle there.
Yeah.
We have some ghost stories from some of the sorority houses on campus. So we'll start with the old Phi Mu house, which was located at the corner of Pryor and Washington Street. They call this ghost the bobby pin ghost. And they said that the ghost would lock the bathroom door from the inside, and they would also find tons of bobby pins in their rooms, and they would find all these bobby pins in the rooms of students who didn't even use bobby pins. So they would just miraculously appear everywhere throughout the house. Another person who lived inside of the house said that they had the same experience, except the bobby pins were in different shades than the ones that they had purchased. They had jet black hair, and the bobby pins were either blonde or brown. In Alpha Gamma Delta, it's one of our sorority houses located near where the old Phi Mu house is. They're right in front of our fitness center on campus. There is a group of ghosts that they call the Giggling Girls. I am an Alpha Gamma alum. I lived in the house. I can vouch for these Giggling Girls. One student recalls the girls practically living in her room, in one of her closet. They enjoyed twisting the doorknobs on the closets, causing them to fly open.
Oh.
One of them scratched on the inside of the closet, and when asked to stop, the doorknob slowly turned, and the door opened an inch before shutting back. So that was a little spooky. When I lived there, I lived on the second floor, and oftentimes, because I was a student leader, I would move back early, like either before or after breaks, and I'd be the only person in the house. And one of these times, I knew I was the only person in the house. It was a weekend, so there wasn't housekeeping, there wasn't any facilities, workers that would have been coming into the house at all. And I heard running down the hallway, and so I was like, who was in the house? Like, none of my sisters have come back yet. And when I opened my door and I checked the entire house, and nobody was there. And we have 3 different entrances into our house, and you can hear all of them open. They slam pretty loud, and I didn't hear any doors open or close. So that was definitely interesting. I have some ghost experiences from Tri Delta. In one room in the Tri Delta sorority house, one of their members had been touched and pushed a couple of times. So like someone just like kind of like grabbed them. They've had keys fly off the walls. Like if they had like a little hook that they put their keys on, they would fly off. Electronics would turn on by themselves. And one of their littles has a video of what sounds like someone crying in an empty bathroom. One student recalls saying there was a man in the former room who we just called the Top Hat Man, and they describe him as a tall man in a top hat, and he shows up normally at night to the girls who live downstairs. So if they live on the downstairs floor, they experience him, but not on the top floor of the Tri Delta house. They say that lights would flicker in the attic, but when you talk to them, they would stop flickering, and now they just announce themselves every time they go up there. And they said, I just announce myself every time I go up there and talk to them about what's going on, and the lights never flicker on them. Also, the Tri Delta sorority house is a historic building at Brenau. So that house used to belong to a former Brenau University president. The first Tri Delta sorority house burned down. It was located in Sorority Circle, so where the Tri Delta gazebo is where their house actually used to be. But the president's daughter was a Tri Delta, and so he actually gave them his house and let them stay there. And so that is where Tri Delta, still to this day, is located. In the Alpha Chi Omega house, which is right across from Crudup, a student says that during their Christmas party in 2019, they covered their charter with wrapping paper, and the ghost apparently got really mad and kept tearing down the paper, and they taped every inch of the wall and it would still fall, and eventually they just gave up, and they were talking in the TV room and they heard a noise, and they looked in the former room and saw a hand with red fingernails pull the wrapping paper down.
Ugh.
And they freaked out and they ran into the other room, and no one was there. And they said they never covered their charter again. And then I have one last story from the Brenau Academy building, where financial aid, where the registrar used to also be located and where the classrooms were. A student who had a class in the academy building one time went to the bathroom downstairs, and she said she always made sure that she shut the hallway door because there was a sign on it so that the noise from the classrooms would reach into the office spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said she was coming back to her classroom and she shut the door and she turned around to go up the steps and the door opened and closed again. And even though she had just closed it and turned around, she heard a knock, 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 knock on the door. And it was very hollow. And she was like, it was in a very distinct pattern. She said no one else was in any of the classrooms or in the hallway. And so she ran up the stairs. She said the next day she was leaving class and she was by herself. And she walked past the steps and heard the same exact knock on the door in the same cadence again when she was by herself. So those are some of our ghost stories at Brenau, and just a little information about some of our Brenau ghosts.
So I do have some questions for you.
Yeah.
Just like in your opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So in your opinion, who do you think is the strongest spirit at Brenau?
I would say probably the strongest spirit is Agnes.
Or the most active,
Yeah, I would definitely say Agnes. And I only say that because she presides in one of the oldest buildings on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So Yona, Bailey, Pierce, Simmons have all been here for 145 years. So that's as long as Brenau has been here. And there's not a single person that I have met that has worked in Pierce, that has had an office in Pierce, just been in there for extended periods of time, that haven't had an interaction with Agnes. I've noticed as I talk to different alumni, some of our older alumni have never heard of Little Red. So unfamiliar on when the Little Red story started, but I've talked to alums who have lived in Crudup and they have never experienced Little Red, but definitely probably 90s on, people have experienced the spirit of Little Red. But I feel like everybody has an Agnes story. And also, if anybody experiences anything spooky, or if they feel a breeze, or they have some type of ghostly experience, they usually just say, oh, that's Agnes. But Agnes stays within Pierce. She doesn't move.
So you don't think she's strong enough to move around campus?
I don't think she's strong enough to move around campus. I think it's common for people to say that she does, just because all of our buildings are pretty old, but that's not to say that there aren't other ghosts that we just haven't necessarily identified on campus. It could be other spirits in some of these buildings. They may be connected with the university. They may not be, but they haven't been thoroughly investigated or researched. So
yeah, so that's why I wanted to form the club.
Yeah.
So my other question, I have two more, I guess. My other one, do you think the little boy is Little Red too, like in the
In Pierce?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know. I've thought about it, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. Because I feel like I haven't heard a lot of stories of people experiencing the little boy that's in Pierce. The only reason they found the little boy in Pierce is when ghost hunters came.
But they didn't get a hint of like the little boy's name or anything?
No, and I think they probably even asked if it was Little Red, but I don't know if they ever got a response. But the experiences specifically in Crudup, Van Hoos, Child Development Center, like that is like a constant experience that people are having. So,
So let me remember. My final question. So, like you said, there's like a lot of activity going on, but we don't really have like any specific spirit yet. So I mean, we did discuss like it might be energies or something like that, but do you believe that there might be like a portal around Brenau that allows more spirits to come through, or?
I wouldn't say that per se. What is a fact is Gainesville is historic. The city of Gainesville is very old. The land that we are on is very old. And I'm sure prior to Brenau being here, there were spirits. And so you never know what has kind of stuck around from before our institution was established to what has developed since we've been here. So it could be a mix of both, but as of right now, there's no way to know for sure where all of our ghosts are coming from. Yeah.
Thanks for joining me today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yes. Here is what Yonah Hall looks like. Here is Wilkes Hall. It is next to Yonah Hall. In this picture, Bailey Hall has the staircase, and then right next to it, there is another gray building, and that is Pierce Auditorium. Here is Simmons Visual Arts Center. Here is Crudup Hall. Here is where the bookstore is at. The small red building is the Academy building. The building in the middle is Financial Aid Office, and then the long red building is West Hall. The building in the front is Crudup, and then there is the bridge. And then the white building, it looks like, is Van Hoos Hall. Here is what the old Phi Mu house looks like. This is the Alpha Gamma Delta house. Here is the Tri Delta house. Here is the Alpha Chi Omega house. Here is the Academy building. Hey guys, I hope you guys liked my video and found out more about all the spirits here at Brenau. The reason why I wanted to make this video was for like content, so that you guys know why I'm investigating my university in the first place. But I hope you guys like this video. Please like and subscribe. Bye!